Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, welcome back to the show.
Yeah, hi.
I say welcome back like you went away. Did you go away?
I was like trying to process this. I was like, nah, I won't think about this too hard. Hey, what's going on?
I'm just trying to be overly friendly about it, right? Right. I think we're all a bit screwed up after what happened on Sunday, and so no one's really kind of sure how to handle the comeback. Because I enjoyed the graphic they had up on the screen saying that the last 99 teams in the past 5 years to do this did not come back and win, and then the Vikings ended up winning. So I think we're all a bit scatterbrained from defeating the Vikings defeating them.
I think if in the last 5 years any other team had done that, the Vikings wouldn't have been able to. Like, they could only exist as an outlier.
Exactly. This is the Vikings were either going to put this at 0-100 or they were going to be the one, and they managed to pull it off almost in defiance of any sort of deity's will. So that was fun. What was the mood?
Entirely in defiance of the deity's will.
What was the mood in the press box for the game?
I mean, we all kind of wanted to check out at halftime. A lot of them had kind of written or pre-written their story, which that's not unusual, by the way. It's not like, all these sports writers wrote the Vikings off. A lot of sports writers will write a good chunk of their story at halftime, fill in the details or alter the course of the story as the game goes on. So actually, though fourth quarter comebacks are like phenomenal things in terms of like ratings and excitement and watching, and probably actually for stories, the actual deadline part. So I don't really have to work on a deadline, so I don't really care about this. But the deadline part for most sports writers makes those excruciating. They hate them.
Giant pain in the ass.
So when the Vikings started coming back, a lot of the writers decided to pre-write the comeback story too. So if you wanted to say sports writers had it in the tank against the Vikings, now you can say they had it in the tank for the Vikings. And so
just hedging. I mean, they were just hedging at this point.
That's all we do.
Yeah. Explains why so many sports journalists are degenerate gamblers.
Right. Exactly. Always middle if you can. But yeah, we were all pretty incredulous. I mean, not just because like this is a thing that doesn't really happen all that often in sports, but also, like, it doesn't particularly happen to the Vikings a lot, and we all have a history of covering the Vikings for the most part. And also, it doesn't seem like it's in Kirk Cousins' DNA, whatever that means. So we're all pretty shocked. But I mean, it was exciting. You're watching a exciting athletic event, right? So you can't help but kind of get into it. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of people were ready to write the Vikings blew the comeback stuff when they had that goal line stand, and the PI that didn't happen offensively or defensively on that last throw to Jaron Kearse and Noah Fant. Statistically, there's about a 30-ish% chance that they were going to score and come back at that point in the game with like 4 seconds left. So that, I mean, that's probably closer than I think a lot of people thought. That would have sucked.
Just a tad. Yeah. I will admit that I had no faith in the Vikings defense during that red zone, during the red zone drive with like a minute left. I was like, are you just going to let them score so you can go down and kick the field goal? Like, can we just get to the point? Can we just get to this point already? I'm tired. I'm so emotionally just exhausted from this game. Can we
we haven't had that muscle worked out for us. Of course we're exhausted.
Yeah.
That kind of like the oh my God, they're going to give this up and then they don't tension is way different than the oh my God, they're coming back tension. So
yeah, I struggle to remember a time that we were, regularly doing that. It hurts. That was odd. So, welcome to this episode of Norse Code. Thank you guys for listening. We'll be going over our spiel in just a moment here, but just want to thank you guys so much for listening, for contributing to the show, whether it be through Patreon, PayPal, or if you just help out on social media, kind of spreading the news about the show. Again, thank you guys so much. Really do appreciate it. We do have 2 new donors to mention briefly. If you would like to donate to the show, you can do it in one of 2 different ways. You can go to patreon.com/norsecode and donate there. That's much more of a monthly subscription. And you can go to paypal.me/norsecode as well. That's a one-time donation. And people who donate this month in the amount of $3.50 per month via Patreon or more. If you want to do $3.54, we're not gonna. I will mention the fact that you're going over the amount that normal people have been putting in. Above and beyond. I'm impressed. But we do have 2 people to mention here. Again, $3.50 or more will get you free swag from us after the Seattle trip. So the first person I want to mention is and I'm going to destroy your last name. Apologies, but I believe it's Jim Skirvin. He is via Patreon. Thank you, Jim, so much. Also, a Patreon donation from Gabe as well, who writes in, "I find value in your podcast. Thank you from Hawaii, and screw the Carr family."
That last one's pretty specific.
Yeah. You know what? I'm okay with it. I've thought about it. Totally fine with it. You know what? Screw the Carr family. Thank you, Gabe.
I did get blocked by 2/3 of that brother group, so maybe it's a reference to that. Yeah, I'm on board. Let's go.
Totally. 100%. Let's do it. Thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. Again, patreon.com/norsecode or paypal.me/norsecode. Really do appreciate it. These things keep us from having to throw ads onto the show. It helps pay for things involving our web hosting, distributing the show, stuff like that. If we are going to be getting different mics or anything like that, it helps with purchasing of WD-40 for chairs, the little things in life. But it also helps with the live show that we will be doing on November 29th at Pedosky's in Seattle, starting about 7 p.m., but the recording itself will likely start about 7:30, 8 o'clock. Again, Pedosky's in Seattle, Washington. We will be there after the bye, ready to record, and we are working on a potential guest, and we hope to see some of you out there, and we will be giving away a ticket to the Monday night game in Seattle. So if you would like to see that game, you should probably head out to the live taping that we'll be doing November 29th, starting at 7, but the recording itself will probably be sometime between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. So all these things aside, we can get into the interactive portion of today's broadcast, which is, I asked the question on Twitter, why did the Vikings win on Sunday? And we got a couple good ones. The first one is the Vikings won this game because I stopped following the game and started playing Star Trek Fleet Commander on my phone whilst making and subsequently drinking a fantastic cinnamon latte and eating lime marmalade on toast. I now have to do this every week until we lose.
That's true. You have to.
Yep, 100%. In my case, I was so annoyed by the... I was so annoyed. I ended up throwing the youngest one into the bath because he needed one anyway. But I just, you know what? I'm fine with missing a few minutes of this game. And then then my jersey got wet, and I went, you know what? I don't even need a jersey for this one. I'm convinced that changing out of the jersey is what made the Vikings win. I feel like there's no scientific evidence to prove this, but that's never stopped me before. Next one is...
Okay, so the way that you said that just made it seem like you were so mad that you killed your youngest child. I was like, I drowned him.
I threw him into the tub. I threw his stinky ass into... Well, I mean, I was upset at how much he stank, but yes, I didn't throw him in the sense that I threw him across the room like I would a hat. I merely...
Odd jobbing your child.
No, not who throws a kid? Honestly.
Honestly.
No. You start the water first and then you coax them in. Yeah. As it turns out, you have to make it seem like it's their idea to do it. It's tragic. I'm explaining all these things to you despite the fact that you're a world-renowned child expert. Next one is The universe, why did the Vikings win? The universe needs to get our hopes up that this is a team of destiny before another crushing playoff run.
I think that's the truest answer that we've gotten out of all 20 answers we got.
Because Albright talked crap on the pod.
Good one. I liked it.
Yep. Kirk went to Pizza Ranch at halftime and went around to the different tables and prayed with the patrons. I know because I was there. I did the thing where I poured corn all over his plate. It was not like the commercial. He got really mad.
It's not very godly of you, Kirk.
No, still. Because they have 3 more primetime games this season, and the network needs important matchups for viewership. Yeah. I started doing things like laundry and dishes at halftime. I also was convinced to do this. Got ham going early and often. I think that's why the Vikings were losing.
Yeah, it's they established the ham. So
establishing the ham is important. The Broncos weren't prepared for 60 minutes in low altitude.
I love this. So kind of funny story. It's another debate story from college. So, skip ahead if you've heard too many of them. But the Wyoming and Boise State debate teams, they obviously practice at really high altitude, a higher altitude than Denver does. And it's 7,000 and 6,000 feet above sea level, I think. And they used to host tournaments all the time. I don't think they do anymore. And they had a preposterous home field advantage, right? Because, we're belting at 500 words a minute or whatever. And we just run out of breath. And, they were molded by this place, right? And so they would just crush people in later speeches in rounds where they really shouldn't have had a chance. And it also helped their stamina at lower elevations. So I just think it's kind of funny.
All these people just expecting. I just imagine the Broncos being drunk on air.
It's got to be too much oxygen, man.
It's way too much oxygen. It needs to be thinner. I followed the tradition of cricket in England and didn't move for the entire fourth quarter when it was looking hopeful. Don't move seat, don't refill drink, don't go to the toilet. Bad luck otherwise.
It means he doesn't go to the bathroom for 5 days, guys.
Well, that's in the ridiculous version of cricket, yes.
The original version.
Yeah, ridiculous too.
T20 is fun though. I gotta say, the faster versions of cricket are a lot of fun to watch. You don't even have to know what's going on.
Yeah. I sent my thoughts and prayers during halftime. Thank you. That probably made a difference. Because losing would have been the predictable thing to do. Bobby Boucher showed up at halftime. I can respect that.
Fair enough.
Voodoo magic and a blood sacrifice at halftime. I feel like the last time that happened, Zimmer lost an eye. So, maybe.
That's not too different from thoughts and prayers if you think about it.
Voodoo magic and blood sacrifice. It's all about intentions.
It's a form of prayer.
Yeah, it's all about intentions at that point.
Yeah.
The team showed up just when the Broncos went into a don't lose coma.
Yeah.
Water found its level. Yeah. Well, you see, the current moon phase is waning gibbous, so the illumination level is 84%. Now, it's no coincidence that Irv Smith Jr. wears 84 and that he scored his first touchdown today, fueling a Vikings victory. Additionally, Mercury is in full retrograde. Retro, taken from the French retro. I assume that's how it's supposed to be sent. Said, meaning backwards, which obviously and accurately predicted the Vikings comeback. It is all very simple once you know what to look for. Well, duh. I feel like an idiot for not pointing that out in my article. Yeah, I feel like that's an article in and of itself. Also, why did the Vikings win? Spite.
I think that's pretty close to the get your hope ups before they kick your teeth in.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's talk about the Broncos game. This was a game of two halves, to be sure. There's no other way to put it. The Vikings played terribly in the first half. They were scorched all over the field, and the run game for the Vikings would not start up. They were Cook was dropping an easy screen pass. This was a mess. If we start on defense, we can begin with saying that this looked like a Vikings defense that was desperately in need of a bye.
Yeah, I'd say so. What's interesting is that the run defense started out pretty good. Eric Kendricks had a good play. Anthony Barr had a good play. Harrison Smith had a good play. It was kind of the passing defense that ended up being fairly suspect early on even. So like Rhodes potentially getting toasted by Cortland Sutton. It actually looked like, I watched that back again. It looked like he was actually looking for an offensive pass interference flag. Obviously they threw a flag, but it was actually for an illegal formation and not for that. But yeah, Cortland Sutton just kind of went off and dominated, and there's not like a ton to go over there because, yeah, you could say Rhodes had a bad game, and obviously this isn't the kind of game that he would have 2 years ago or anything like that. So in that context, it's pretty bad. And I know I've been defending Rhodes a lot on this podcast, but one of those throws, he's in perfect position. He gets his hand on the ball and Sutton just wins it. It's just this remarkable contested catch where you'd think that they'd actually have, a less than 20% chance of reeling the ball in. And he does. Rhodes is in perfect position. He's draped all over him without committing PI. And Sutton brings the ball in. And it's like, well, I don't know if you can blame him for that. But over the course of the game, 101 yards were given up to Sutton by Rhodes. So, yeah, you can take some of these plays away, but he still probably gives up 60 yards by playing the ball poorly or just not having the talent or physical skill anymore.
And that's not even including the penalty yards that are attributed to him as well, especially on that first touchdown drive.
Yeah, additional penalty yards. Again, he got toasted on that first pass to Sutton that didn't count, even though it was an overthrow. But yeah, it was just, I think that played a really tremendous role. The Vikings actually did put Brandon Allen under a ton of pressure in that game. So it's not even that the front four wasn't doing its job. And in fact, I thought Julio Johnson had a better game than he did last week. Was particularly good against the run, but importantly kept Eric Kendricks clean. But despite all of that, they were able to kind of complete passes, specifically to Sutton. They got a couple of the tight ends and stuff like that. Barr was not great in coverage. He was great against the run. And Kendricks even wasn't all that spectacular in coverage either. This is probably in a season where he's had nothing but great games. This is probably his least good game. And so that's kind of how the first half just developed. A lot of little mistakes from a couple of different players and a number of big mistakes from Rhodes, and then a couple of just really spectacular plays from the Broncos.
As a side note, I don't know if I've ever watched a game with so many illegal formation penalties as this.
What are the three? There were at least three.
I'm convinced there might have been three in the first half, but I'm convinced there was more. Like this was,
I'm pretty sure there were three in the first half. Actually, yeah.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
This was just.
There must have been more.
Yeah, this was just an astonishing number because I know it happened at least twice in the second half. I was just sitting like, I don't understand how you keep doing this. Like, is this?
Yeah. Normally you'd say, hey, that's a rookie quarterback, but it's not a rookie quarterback. He was drafted he was an undrafted quarterback in 2016 or something like that. He's been around. He's been on like practice squads and stuff. So he's not a rookie. And it's not just like a quarterback thing though, because the issue is not that you're snapping the ball in the middle of an illegal shift. That would be on the quarterback. Obviously the quarterback has to make sure that everyone's kind of adjusting what they're doing, but they had like 9 men on the line of scrimmage instead of like 7, which is the legal limit, right? That's not limit, but that's the requirement. You have to have 7 on the line of scrimmage in some fashion. And so usually that's a tight end and one of the receivers. And on these, they had 8 and 9 players on the line of scrimmage. And obviously the quarterback has to point that out and correct it. But like also that's on like the tight ends and receivers that are not lined up correctly. And you're just like, well, how is this happening? Like you practice, right? Like what? Like this is not like a super complicated rule either. It's like 7 on the line of scrimmage. That's it. That's the rule.
Yeah. It was just astonishing to continue to watch it throughout the games. Even when they were making their comeback, they pulled it off too. They had the same thing happen. Like, how do you keep doing this? So the defense did not respond well to getting punched in the face with the scores and with the field goals that were being made by the Broncos. And maybe this was just something that I noticed, but you could see right around the 20-0 mark that the Vikings it looked like they weren't even bothering tackling, like to wrap up. This looked like a team that was just trying to do the thing where you hit the guy hard and don't wrap up. You're just trying to bounce them down. And as a result, it looked like the Broncos were getting the additional yardage on them. So they looked defeated through and through for this defense, and which is to say that they were also picking on Curse an immense amount of their targets.
Yeah, I found that kind of interesting. Well, it was kind of interesting the amount that Curse played. Some of it had to do with the fourth quarter injury that Harrison Smith suffered. Believe it's a hamstring. Yes. But yeah, like Curse and Sendejo, I don't want to say switched off a lot, but I mean, they kind of did. And then obviously Curse ended up playing a lot because of the Harrison Smith injury. But yeah, they picked on Curse, particularly with Noah Fant, which is the matchup, right? You want Curse on tight ends. It's kind of just what he's built for. It's why the Vikings drafted him in the 7th round. And yeah, they just kept kind of going at him. And I thought, he responded pretty well to that. I think early on it wasn't working spectacularly, but obviously at the end it worked phenomenally well.
I forget if it was all 3 targets in the red zone ended up going toward Curse, or if it was just the last 2. But it was
the last 2.
Yeah, it was just the last 2. Yeah, it was well done by him, and we'll get to that here in a few. But man, this was, and we're not even getting into the offensive side of things. Like, this looked like a Vikings team that couldn't get to the quarterback and was putting themselves in a very bad situation on second down when they would let a run go through for 8-9 yards.
Yeah. It felt like that. We actually have a question about the Vikings' ability to defend the run on 1st and 10. I'm not sure kind of what the first half split is for in terms of running. Obviously, it was much better than in the second half, but it really did feel like after that first drive, and the Vikings, I think, forced a 3-and-out on that drive. Well, with the penalty, it's always difficult to say, this is a 3-and-out or not, but they did force them to give it the ball without scoring any points in the first drive. After that first drive, it did feel like, either Johnson was kind of getting swallowed up a little bit in the run game, or Stefan was kind of getting blocked out of it. I thought the ends were playing pretty well. I don't think it was really on that. Gideon and then later Eric Wilson, they were kind of stretching out when they were in base packages, and the Broncos do like to be in that a lot because they really like Andy Janovich, which, hopefully he gets better soon. And then they like having Noah Fant out there. So 21 personnel that puts you in your base package. It seemed like it was kind of unraveling the run defense. Like the pass defense, the coverage was losing out pretty quickly, but the run defense, it felt like, was kind of unraveling slowly, which has its own kind of horror element attached to it, if you will.
Yeah, not pleasant, not something that we want to be reliving ever again. Despite the fact I just rewatched the game and was just wincing throughout that first half, it really turned into a situation of like, what else could go wrong for the Vikings? Because we ended up, let's go on the offensive side of the ball. This was Cook unable to make it past the line of scrimmage a lot. There were more than a few tackles for loss. There was the drop on the screen pass, and I want to say it was Riley Reif. I'd really like to know his PFF number for the first half of that game, because it looked like he could have been, it could have been a negative number for all I know. Like, he did not protect that quarterback. And the sack on Cousins that led to a fumble was just proof of that.
Yeah. The sack was just embarrassing.
I forget if it was 4 sacks in the first half or if it was 4 sacks total, but that was ugly.
4 sacks in the first half. I think Shelby Harris got the final sack for the Broncos, the 1 sack in the second half. It's interesting because those 4 or 5, if you include the second half sacks, are the only pressures he was under all game, which I find like, when does that? I don't think that's ever happened before. Like, I that's so bizarre to me.
Your only pressures are sacks.
Right. Well, the fact that you have as many sacks as 4 or 5, and no other pressures. Like I'm sure there's been a game where there's only been one sack and no pressures. And that's just because the offensive line is good and there's just kind of one mistake and it leads to a sack. But I don't know any instance where there's only been 5 pressured dropbacks and all of them are sacks. That's like wild to me. So that's kind of interesting. But yeah, the offensive line I thought was doing a pretty poor job because obviously those 4 pressures / sacks all occur in the first half. Part of that has to do with the fact that the Vikings they only had 1 play action pass that entire first half, which I find kind of surprising. Okay, let's see. First half, Denver had 3.9 yards per carry, and the Vikings had 1.8. But yeah, I think the lack of play action played a role. I think the Vikings, when they were passing in fairly obvious down and distances, and so they couldn't really use play action all that often because otherwise they were running the ball, and they were running it pretty ineffectively. You mentioned the drop from Dalvin Cook on the screen. We also should probably mention the Diggs completion downfield that was taken away by penalty, which I think was also on the offensive line, holding or something like that. A lot of penalties in the first half and a lot of it on the offensive line. So even if they don't give up pressures, other ways they hurt the game, including run blocking, and a fumble is pretty big, I think. So it was just kind of just a messy game in that first half for the Vikings anyway.
Yeah.
I think probably also for the Broncos. It's not like they were winning cleanly, but it's kind of, one of those slow chipping away. They keep on adding points in kind of messy ways, sort of games, and it just felt like it was difficult to come back from. So, a lot of differences in that first half, I think, from what we normally see the Vikings play, because not a ton of targets to Diggs, a ton of targets to CJ Ham, and not a ton of play action. We usually see a lot of that. It didn't feel like they were aggressive downfield, which I don't think that's necessarily one-to-one with play action. Very often they can be aggressive downfield without play action. Very often on play action, they pass short. So I don't think it's necessarily the case that those two are related, but they just weren't aggressive throwing downfield. I watched a little bit of the All-22, the first half specifically, and it felt like they were being taken away. I don't think Kirk was necessarily missing especially in the first quarter, missing receivers downfield. As time went on, I thought Diggs was doing a good job getting open, more and more open. And so it would have been nice to see some targets to Diggs. I think that is on Cousins. But yeah, it was just the good plays were taken away by penalty. I think there was another run taken away by penalty that was actually positive, but tackles for loss, tackles at the line of scrimmage, not a ton the Vikings could get done in the first half. And it's just like they couldn't beat defenders to the edge on outside zone. They couldn't, trick defenders out of lanes on inside zone. They couldn't get open downfield. They didn't engage in play action. A lot of penalties on the offensive line. Just a really uncharacteristically bad, even though we would call this a good defense. They were 5th in points per drive entering the game. I would say it was just a remarkably uncharacteristic game from a schematic standpoint and from a player execution level standpoint.
Can we talk about the free play controversy that has come up? Because this is the second week in a row that a free play was gifted to the Vikings, and it turned into a check down as opposed to a throw down field. And in this case, Diggs looked to be in a position where he would have been able to make a play.
Yeah, Diggs had a hole shot between the safety and the cornerback. It looked like it was cover 6, so cover 2 on that side of the field, and Diggs was in that hole between the cover 2 safety and the cornerback sitting beneath. That would have been a good shot. But the other side, so cover 6 is cover 2 on one side and cover 4 on the other side. And on the other side, it might have been BC Johnson, who was on the other side of the field, and he just toasted the corner, who I think is also a Harris, like not Chris Harris, but like the 5th round Harris. And he demolishes that guy, and he's just open for a streak downfield. And so he would have been an even better target. And nope, nothing doing. Kirk apparently addressed this on his podcast, which I have to keep on reminding myself exists. There's actually a funny bit where he reads tweets from the first half, which, go off. You got the comeback. You get to do that. But yeah, he mentions that he just didn't see it, right? Which, I figured, like, that's not interesting or new. Like, we didn't think you saw a free play, and we're like, finally, get a throw to the fullback. Um, but yeah, this happened again. I know Eric Thompson pointed this out, and even though he used the words free play, and I think he also used the words like penalty or offsides or something, a bunch of people replied with, but there was a safety over top of Diggs. And it's like, well, okay, that's interesting information. What happens? Like, what do they pick it off? They get a pick? Ooh, oh no. Like, it's really funny that people are taking like some of the criticisms of the first half as like repudiations of their character. And it's just like, no, he should take the free shot. Like, Cousins wasn't, entirely at fault for what was happening in the first half. I do think that he was, one of the several problems the Vikings had, at least on offense. Obviously on defense, there's a number of things, starting with Xavier Rhodes. But you got to take those shots because they don't come very often or very easily. If you can get a free 40 yards on half of your throws that do that, do it, right? Like, it's the one time you get to average 20 yards a play. There's no risk. And he just didn't see it. And I don't think he sees it generally. Is that a thing I would expect a normal human to be able to process? No, I don't think that you should be able to see a yellow flag just kind of move concurrently with an offsides lineman and be able to deduce in that half a second that you've got to deduce that it's an offsides penalty and you've got a free shot downfield while people are bearing down on you, still willing to hit you. Like, that's not normal, but it is kind of the standard by which we evaluate quarterbacks, and he is one of those. And he didn't see it. So that's on him. And, you wouldn't have needed to come back by as much or have kind of that nerve-wracking 30% chance of a Denver comeback at the very end. So, yeah, it would have been nice. I don't know why it's so controversial, but like Eric Thompson tweeted it out, and a bunch of people responded with, "You can't throw that. There's a safety there." And Eric is like slowly and patiently, although less patiently over time, explaining it does not matter.
Yeah, and the other fun thing on that replay is he was not under pressure at that point either. So,
right, like if it's a normal play, what are you doing? Why are you throwing to the fullback? Yeah. You're not under pressure. There's a receiver wide open, BC Johnson on the left side of the field. Diggs normal open on in the corner shot on the right side of the field, and CJ Ham, huh?
Nope, Ham was the intended target. Ham was the number one read on that play. It was a Ham screen. That's all it was. It's nothing.
Well, it's like Spider 2-wide banana, always throw to the fullback.
Exactly. Just God. So the first half ends with a Sendejo interception. You could argue that this is kind of the turning point of the game, in that the Vikings were finally able to get a stop and do something. If only, even though the Vikings didn't end up doing anything with the interception, but they didn't end up getting it, and that was nice.
Well, and it just felt like a return to neutral. I don't think anyone felt energized by it, except for Sendejo, who was clearly feeling himself. Because the fumble occurred on the play prior, and you're just like, okay, back to even.
Yep. Oh, we get it back. Awesome. Sendejo was super pleased, and admittedly, I was like, oh, okay, well, there's a little bit of life. There's the Vikings showed like an Avril Lavigne level of like alive in that first half.
Certainly, they put on a simulation of being there.
Yes, there we go. There was, and the second, most of the part of the second half anyway felt more like a Melissa-sized amount of alive. So
a lot of Melissa in the second half, very, very visible, almost too visible.
Check out the episode 300 clip show to understand that exactly. So halftime happens. Zimmer presumably walks in and destroys everything in the room, and the second half begins. And
so this is interesting. No, he does not. Uh,
I liked the story from Diggs in that he just went in and went, "You guys need to play. You guys aren't playing. You guys need to play."
Yeah, I think it was. Chad Graff or John Krasinski, one of my colleagues at The Athletic, please subscribe, posted a story about what happened at halftime. And a bunch of players were like, yeah, we thought he'd be pissed and yell at us. And he didn't do that. And that was kind of weird.
Is it like the boss that, if he's mean to you, then he's normal. But if he starts being nice to you, you start to worry. Like, oh, he's going to cut us all.
Yeah, right. Yeah. It might have been it. It could have been like that. Or, it's like you got to be scared of your parents when they calm down. You're like, oh, God, they're thinking this through. That's not good for me.
This is the opposite of what I wanted to do. Oh, no.
But yeah, he tells them that they need to play. Someone after the game asked if he gave like a Magic halftime speech. I almost laughed because like that's just like never how it works anymore. Like there's no Vince Lombardi giving like a halftime speech. It's like you've got 12 minutes. Here are the adjustments we're going to make. Please like go to the bathroom and stuff. Like it's very, you don't have enough time to conjure a magic speech. And so someone asked if he gave a magic speech. He's like, well, I said something. I don't know if, inspired them or anything like that. I told them they needed to play better and then they did. All right. Thanks.
That no nonsense stuff that Matt Patricia wishes he was good at.
Right. He just walks in. Hey, everybody, back straight, improve your posture.
Have you called your mom recently? Call your mom.
But yeah, it makes a couple of adjustments, discusses with the offensive people what they need to do. They found some magic,
all of a sudden, play action appears in the playbook again, and Diggs has his first big gain, and it was at that moment that there seemed like there was a little bit of life.
Yeah, so Diggs was growing gradually frustrated, especially after the lack of a deep shot in the free play, and he's getting kind of animated on the sideline. And again, John Krasinski at The Athletic wrote a story about Diggs's particular emotional arc over the course of the game as told by the view from the press box at the sideline through a set of binoculars. It's actually a really well-written story. I wish I was as good as John at writing anything. But you've got that 44-yard shot, which pretty good throw. What was interesting is like at the time I saw the throw, I saw Diggs kind of slow up to get it. And I was like, yeah, it's not ideal. He could have thrown him for a touchdown. And then I was like, shut up, Arif. They just need a play. Who gives it? Like
they just need some yards at this point. They're going to start feeding Rudolph here for a little while too. Right.
And I was like, yeah, okay, fine. They needed that. So it was kind of interesting. So I broke down the 44-yard play at The Athletic. That one was a 4 verts. I also broke down the 54-yard touchdown, and I broke down the 32-yard touchdown with Kyle Rudolph. So the 54-yarder and the 32-yarder are both off of play action. So Cousins has 2 of his 3 touchdowns off of play action in that game. And they were for Hugh Monk. He averaged 22 yards per attempt on play action because of that. And I think it's just it was those 2 completions plus like 1 more. So his passer rating on play action in week 11 is 156.3, which is actually pretty close to a second half passer rating anyway. But yeah, that one was 4 verts. It's a fairly simple read. The problem is the Broncos are actually in a really good coverage for it. And it's a difficult coverage to explain. Again, I broke it down, but it's essentially cover 3 that in this case turned into cover 1, so that you could cover all 4 receivers going deep with a free safety up top. And that didn't matter. Diggs got the ball, 44 yards. And then later, I think that one was the Irv Smith touchdown.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, that was, if you're the kind of person that believes in momentum, that was kind of the biggest spark that started the comeback. If you're not the kind of person that believes in momentum, that was a discrete event that occurred in the game, and it increased the odds of winning.
Kirk said that this is a game of momentum.
He did say that.
Just wanted to make that clear that the Kirk did in fact say this game is a game of momentum.
I was in the room when he said that. Yep.
I'm surprised.
I did not voice my thoughts on it.
Did you have to take a cab home because your eyes were back and had rolled to the back of your head so you couldn't drive?
We should see. The thing is, I don't not believe in momentum. I just don't believe in it. That doesn't make any sense? Okay.
I don't necessarily believe in gravity. It exists and I watch it happen, but I'm not. I don't know. I still have questions.
Well, no, hold on. We actually don't know what causes that. So there could be a force that acts exactly like gravity, and we wouldn't know the difference. Anyway.
Just like we don't know if we don't know about Melissa and Avril Lavigne. Fine, there are questions.
Look, if gravity's so great, why doesn't it work at the quantum level? Huh? No one knows. Okay. So, momentum it's like you can't really talk about it the way that it's talked about because individual plays can swing momentum so much that it renders the concept meaningless. But I do think players individually respond emotionally to events that occur on the field. The problem is there are 22 players on the field. They all have different reactions to the same events. Sometimes they're in sync, sometimes they're not. It can lead to overconfidence. It can lead to the appropriate amount of confidence. It can lead to underconfidence. Who knows? I do think it substantially and materially affects play. I think the reason that you don't see momentum show up in study after study after study after study about how momentum should occur or whatever is because of that complex set of interactions between 22 players that occurs over the course, and not even 22 players because you got to do subs. So 28 players that occurs over the course of a series or a whole game. But I don't think I think anybody who's been involved in any competitive activity does know that playing with confidence is better and that this is the kind of thing that can give you confidence, but also playing with overconfidence is bad. And I feel like the things that give you momentum also have the ability to give you overconfidence. Anyway, in this game, I think the Diggs touchdown, not the Diggs touchdown, the Diggs big play prevented them from going flat. Can I prove that? Probably not. But it seems unlikely that if they don't score a touchdown on that first drive, that they have the ability to score the next 3 touchdowns that they do score.
Yeah, and that was a drive that included a fourth down conversion as well. So the Vikings ended up being 2 for 2 on fourth down conversions in a situation at a time when they desperately needed them. So
the whole game, it was 6 for 6 on fourth down, right?
Yeah,
it's the money down.
It was ridiculous. Apparently, you just needed to skip to that. Also, I
have to fourth down.
Yeah, exactly. I also have this theory that if Eric Wilson doesn't recover the muffed punt from Hughes, the game ends.
Yeah, I don't think that's a theory. I think that's fair.
Yeah. Oof. It was just one more thing. One more thing.
So if Hughes, I don't think you can keep him at punt returner, right? That's 3 dangerous moments. Right. Plus, obviously, the Amir Abdullah kick return fumble. But that's why Marcus Sherrills was so good. Well, it's one of the 2 reasons, but man, that's dangerous. That's just a free offensive play for them. Can he fix that? I don't know. I don't know how often this occurred to him at was it Central Florida? Yeah. I imagine not often, otherwise they wouldn't have put him there. But man, that's rough. But yeah, it was a ton of small things that could have derailed, which is why comebacks like that don't happen, right? The reason that teams went 0-99 is because fumble recovery rates are 50%, and when you fumble that, suddenly a bunch of teams are out because they fumbled that, and the other team recovered, and then they kick a field goal, and now you're just kind of out of winning range. So. Yeah, I mean, there's tons of small things, right? Cousins threw 3 or 4 perfect passes in the game. The pass to Tyler Conklin, the second pass to Diggs was perfectly in stride. The second touchdown was perfectly in stride, the 54-yarder to Diggs. The Rudolph one, yeah, it's a good throw, but he had a lot of margin for error on it because it was just the right play against the right defense. They drew up plays on a whiteboard partway through the game because they had exhausted their 2-minute offense. And, one of those plays goes weird or somebody doesn't remember their assignment from August. And it just goes the other way. They had like zero margin for error. And, any small thing would have derailed that whole thing. And again, they were a couple of yards from getting that game back. So, even just one more thing had gone wrong in the second half. And we're talking about a team that, again, cannot close late. So I don't know. It's just kind of a stunning. I mean, obviously it's stunning, but it's kind of interesting breaking it down play by play and thinking about what are the likeliest outcomes of this play, and what would have happened if it was not the outcome that had happened. And you're just like, yeah, all right, cool. After the game, the same person actually asked about the halftime speech, asked if this team was special. And I don't know, this doesn't feel like a team of destiny to me, right? Like the 2017 team felt like a team of destiny as much as it did them. And the 2009 team felt like a team of destiny.
Yeah.
Does this feel like a team of destiny to you?
Not necessarily, no. This seems like a team that's good. This seems like a team...
yeah, which that's a totally different... Yeah, I agree. Yeah,
this seems like a team that's good. This seems like a team that the last 2 years we had a really great defense, and this year we are missing parts of it. Like, it seems like we're not as good at third down, which I don't know if statistically that's accurate, but it seems like that. And it seems like we have more problems with the pass this year than we have in the past 2 years. So it seems less like this is a team of destiny and more like we're 8-3. So like it seems like we're in a good spot, but not like this is something that we feel like this has got some real legs on it. The NFC is crazy this year.
It is. We were just talking about playoff scenarios for the Vikings before the show, and I'm not going to say it's safe to assume the Packers lose to the 49ers, but let's assume that that's the case because it's the most likely scenario. The Packers, the rest of the schedule, obviously it looks very similar to the Vikings. They play Washington. The Vikings already did. But I don't know. It feels like the Packers, unless they lose to the Lions or the Bears, are just going to get the top seed, or not the top seed, but the NFC North title. Mm-hmm. And that causes some problems. The alternative is that, San Francisco loses and that takes them not out of contention for the bye, but it makes the bye an open spot. But now the Vikings can't contend for it because the Packers are above them. So very weird NFC because you've got a once defeated 49ers, a twice defeated Packers, who have a much better divisional record. Tough to say that this is a scenario where you can say the Vikings are a team, especially because they're not consistently pulling, stuff out of thin air, right? Because they would have done that against the Chiefs, right? Or they would have done that, against the Packers where they got within 8 yards of winning. Maybe it's the kind of situation where those late game scenarios teach you the lessons you need to learn and give you resiliency or whatever, and you end up pulling out late game heroics. But it's not like the team's producing a ton of turnovers.
No, this isn't a team that is like astonishingly gritty. Like this isn't some the Ravens teams that made runs and won. Like this is a good team that still has question marks, and when they're on, man, they are on. And when he's rolling out into play action, things are going really well. But I don't know if this is a situation where you look at it and go, one more year and they might have it. I don't even know if that's it necessarily. It's just odd. Yeah. So let's talk about the Diggs touchdown, which was just gorgeous. And Diggs had all the time in the world on that, and he clearly had beaten his man.
Yeah. Chris Harris, who before the game said that Diggs wasn't going to beat him over the top, said that he was shadowing Diggs all game, interestingly said that he would be doing that regardless of whether or not Adam Thielen was healthy, which I kind of find fascinating. It feels like more often than not, top cornerbacks, and this isn't true 100% of the time, more often than not, top cornerbacks are shadowing Diggs and not Thielen, even though Thielen historically has outproduced Diggs. I don't know. Like that's really kind of like I could say, hey, that's evidence for my position that Diggs is the better of the two receivers, but like it probably is. It's certainly not definitive. I just find it kind of like fascinating. Is it because of a matchup thing? Is it because like people like Patrick Peterson, Chris Harris are better dealing with the kind of quickness Diggs has because they're both pretty quick and they both have very similar skill sets. But yeah, Harris says Diggs isn't going to be over the top before the game, tells Tom Pelissero he just isn't like those burners like Tyreek Hill, T.Y. Hilton, and somebody else, Odell Beckham, right? And Tom Pelissero goes to Diggs, and he goes, hey, the scouting report is that you're quick, you're a good route runner, but you're not as fast as Hill, Beckham, and Hilton. And Diggs' response was, you got to admit, those guys are pretty fast. And that was it. And then, of course, on the field, he burns Harris for a 54-yard touchdown. Yeah, he was wide open, really great route running too, because he plants a foot to the outside and really sells that outside route before breaking inside. And Harris has to turn his whole body around essentially to follow Diggs, and by then he's gone. Interestingly, Cousins said that Diggs was the fourth read on that play. After watching it and breaking it down, again, broke that down at The Athletic. I see it, like, clearly he's the fourth read on the play, but Cousins goes through his progressions really quickly on that play in order to get to the fourth read. And that's why Cousins said that route is there about once in a decade. And he said that's happened twice this year, which I find kind of interesting. I don't know that I would design plays where Diggs is the fourth read in a progression. I understand kind of why you would do that a couple of times, right? Because if they're focusing on Diggs and you're rolling out the opposite way, that means you've got numbers on your side, on the side that you're rolling out to, and you never have the guy on the far side of the rollout as your first or second read. They're always the third, fourth, or fifth read. So I get it, but point of Diggs is that he can win those 1 versus 2 matchups. So I think I would probably do it less often, but I get why he was the fourth read. But yeah, that was a gorgeous throw. He is moving, I don't want to say across his body or he's moving as he's throwing. But that's essentially what he's doing. He's throwing the ball away from the direction he was running. Always difficult to do. Obviously, he has to set himself a little bit more, but just nailed it. Fantastic throw. Good catch. Runs into the end zone. Good way to cap a drive. And was it 6 drives, unless you count the kickoff return as a drive, then it's 7 drives that end with no scores, and then 4 drives that all end in scores. Remarkable.
And before we talk about what the Broncos were doing, we should probably touch on the Kyle Rudolph touchdown, which he danced into the end zone. He waltzed in. There was no one around him for quite some time.
Yeah, kind of funny. Duke Dawson ends up trying to turn around and cover him, and he just falls flat on his face. Dawson, I think, was either protecting against Cousins potentially scrambling out and running, or Irv Smith coming across in the flat. Either way, yeah, Rudolph was way open, and that is the case of having a good offensive play dialed up against that particular defense, because it allows him to walk through essentially zones. But it's also the case where I think Diggs helps causes it. Because if you watch the next gen version with all the dots, which, and it'll show up probably on the All 22 as well. But if you, go to Game Pass, if you have Game Pass, and you click on that play in the corner, there's a little scheme button with X's and O's and arrows. And you click on that. It's not even a button. It's just like an overlay on the video itself. And you click on that in the bottom right corner, it'll bring up the dots. And then you can kind of watch the way that all the individual players move from a top-down perspective using the next-gen tracking chips. And in that, it looks like they're in cover 3. And the way that the defense responds to Diggs, he's got such gravity that he's pulling all these defenders with him. It looks actually like it's actually intended to be cover 2, and it's not. And so Diggs pulls in both safeties and the cornerback covering him, Chris Harris, and he just vacates this area of the field of defenders, and there's no defenders there. I think Diggs is running a post route, which against cover 3 is not ideal. But that's the whole reason you've got everybody else running all their routes. And so that combination opens up all of this space for Rudolph, who in this scenario should be covered by, the cornerback that should be letting Diggs get covered by the middle safety, and the strong safety underneath. But the strong safety is rotating up to stop Diggs, leaves Kyle Rudolph open. He moves across. The cornerback on the far side should be leaving Diggs to go back to Rudolph. He doesn't. Rudolph has acres of space, runs upfield. The only person who gets close is Duke Dawson, who I mentioned, just falls flat on his face. Touchdown. So that's another play where I don't want to say Diggs caused it, right? Because I think it's very likely that Rudolph is open, kind of regardless. But it goes from like a nice 20-yard gain into a 32-yard touchdown because of the defensive positioning that Diggs crafted. I don't know. It's just kind of really phenomenal stuff. You'd think on one of these drives, if these big plays don't get turned into touchdowns, let's say Diggs gets tackled as soon as he catches it, just like he did on the 44-yarder. Rudolph gets tackled as soon as he catches it or whatever. I imagine one of these drives does not end in a touchdown. And so the fact that they're able to convert these big plays directly into touchdowns, obviously enormous.
And likely the reason why we were able to pull off the victory. On the other side of the ball, the defense woke up and was able to get stops and was also able to sack the quarterback.
Yeah, only allowed 3 points in the second half, which is very reminiscent of their defensive performances against the Bears and the Packers, where they allowed 21 points in the first quarter. They allowed the Bears however many points in the first half, and then just didn't allow points in the second half. Typically, you should win if you only allow 21 points or 20 points or 19 points or whatever. And so on the whole, you could say the defense was good. But given that it's, quote unquote, a tale of two halves, a lead which my editor said he would fire me from The Athletic if I used, is a tale of two halves. Actually, in response to that, I just sent him a whole reworked opening to that book, and he rejected it. So yeah, we'll see. But
subscribe to The Athletic, folks.
But
you can see the filtered version of Arif's thoughts.
I wrote it all up. I put it in a notepad, and I was like, "This is so bad. I love it." And I sent it to him, and he was just not pleased. But yeah, they were able to get a lot of pressure. They did a much better job against the run. Which, allowing 4 yards carry versus allowing whatever it was by the end of the game. But yeah, getting sacks on Brandon Allen, that was obviously huge. So who got sacks in that game? Everson Griffin definitely got one because he's been on a pseudo sack streak, kind of. But after that, Jaleel Johnson?
Yes.
Because it wasn't we didn't see an Afadi sack, which would have been nice for the story that I keep on promising to publish and not publishing yet.
Why would you want to do something like that? I'm confused. Was it another situation where you provided a lead line and they decided not to return your call for the day?
We're not associated.
This is no.
He's not here.
Here. Not
but yeah, they put a lot of pressure. They put a lot of pressure on Brandon Allen. You got a ton from Danielle Hunter, who
Jaleel Johnson, yes.
It was Jaleel Johnson got the other one. A ton of pressure from Danielle Hunter, ended up with 2 quarterback hits. Anthony Barr ended up with a quarterback hit. Harrison Smith ended up with a quarterback hit. 5 additional pressures from Hunter. Just a really phenomenal day. And that was a big part of the inability of the Broncos to get kind of the ball moving in the second half because that pressure kind of started arriving. And the thing is, they were doing a pretty decent job winning off the snap, but the plays were designed in such a way that that he was able to get rid of the ball quickly. But it's important to note that they had 14 plays under pressure, so I want to say about 33% or so of the dropbacks occurred under pressure for the Broncos, and most of that occurred in the second half. There were 7 throwaways from Brandon Allen, so essentially 7 incompletions just caused by that, plus the interception, plus obviously the 2 sacks, and Allen ends up with a passer rating of 1.7 when under pressure. So that was like a really tremendous part of that kind of second half performance. And the defensive line in particular, it just was really good. And again, Julio Johnson, had a better game. He's making a pretty decent case for kind of being the nose tackle of the future. I think right as it stands right now, it's really more kind of Armin Watts's position, and Julio Johnson just is going to have to deal with either being a role player or finding a starting job somewhere else. Either way, would be fine. But he had a pretty good game, and besides that sack, I think he got an additional pressure. He was able to keep Eric Kendricks clean for a good chunk of the day for Kendricks to be able to make plays against the run. That said, he did get kind of pushed around a little bit like he did last week, but for the most part, I think a better performance for sure. If they ever resolve that 3 technique position, that'll be huge. Because again, Shamar Stephen, I don't think is playing well. Is supposed to be an asset against the run and sometimes picks up double teams while Julio Johnson takes on somebody one-on-one. But, for the most part, just doesn't generate pressure as a 3 technique. And I think that would turn the defense back into maybe not a top 5 defense, but move it into a position that's a lot more familiar for the Vikings. So from top 10 to top 8 or something like that. Really great, I think, just overall from the front 7 in that regard. And Kendricks was pretty good in coverage again, including another really crucial pass deflection at a critical moment in the game. Good habit to form, I think.
Like it's one of those good problems. Oh, he's at it again. Fantastic.
Right, yeah.
Can we talk about how how the universe is trying to prove your takes are wrong with the fact that now this is the second week in a row that a kicker has missed a field goal against the Vikings?
Yeah, the universe does seem to be bending in that direction, but I've got the one take that is more powerful than most cosmic forces, which is that Trubisky can't throw left, and that take is doing really spectacularly for me. So as much as the universe tries to combat it, I've got that on my side, and then the Wentz stuff, Nelson Aguilar is just doing just enough for me to continue with the Wentz thing. So
just keep dropping those balls.
Yeah, all right. Catch those babies. But yeah, universe is trying real hard. But my takesmanship is strong. It will be resilient. The fact that a couple of kickers have missed kicks since I've pointed this out against the Vikings, that's a setback from a takesmanship perspective, but we must persevere.
You got to do what you got to do. I will admit that I was greatly amused that shortly after you published the piece about how the Vikings seem to be susceptible to kickers, all of a sudden they just start missing. Darn shame. I guess people are just reading the work and just assuming that that's what's supposed to be happening, and then they start missing.
It got out of their heads. This will be easy. Arif said it would be.
It's that wonderful reverse curse. I got nothing. So the end of the game was a lot more nail biting like ish than it needed to be, I felt. But this was kind of the theme that the Broncos were just once they got down, they were still able to move the ball. The quarterback was able to scramble a little bit, and they just kept working on curse until it finally bit them at for the last play of the game.
Yeah, the final drive was 19 plays. Obviously longer than it needed to be for the Vikings.
By at least 9, by at least 10, maybe even 12 plays.
Yeah, you could argue. Not managed particularly well by Vic Fangio, I'll say that. Really feels like that this is just a defensive head coach problem. I don't know, but then Andy Reid has the same problem, so I guess who knows. But yeah, it starts out nice, right? So you've got passing complete to Sutton. You've got a sack from Julio Johnson at the end. They're out now at 3rd and 13. That should be the game, right? And then Royce Freeman, 14 yards, I think, on Anthony Barr. Not great. Okay, Royce Freeman gets the ball again, 2 yards. Armon Watts stops him. Fantastic. Then Philip Lindsay runs for 13 yards. Oh, no. Oh, actually, it's a holding penalty. Go back 10 yards. Okay, so it's 2nd and 13. Cortland Sutton. 12 yards, 3rd and 1, not the end of it. Oh, penalty on Garrett Bowles, who hasn't had a penalty all game. Great, 3rd and 6. Incompletion. Daniil Hunter, I think, might have gotten a hand on it. If not, he at least hit the quarterback. Fine, 4th and 6. That should be it. Noah Fant over Anthony Barr. Now it's 1st and 10, and they're at the Minnesota 34. And it just keeps happening where it's like, good, bad. Good, bad. And it's like, how can you keep this up? And again, the Broncos ended up finishing under 30% on 3rd down. The Vikings were great on 3rd down over the course of the game, and 100%, just like the Vikings, on 4th down. I think that made them 4 for 4. So I guess they should just be lucky that the final play wasn't done 4th down. It was in fact on 3rd down. And that's a clock management problem from the Broncos.
Clearly, this was on them. The fact that they weren't able to put that into a 4th down situation and tried to win it on 3rd. Should have knelt.
Yeah.
Should have knelt. All right, so we've covered the game fairly extensively. Is there anything that we missed or anything that should be said about this game before we move into you bragging about a fantasy football win?
I would never do that. I do want to say, like, so obviously it's very easy to say, obviously Kirk had a great game because, in the end, his final numbers look really great. It's easy to push back on that and say, hey, actually he had a really bad first half. That's on him. It's also easy to push back on that and say, hey, that first half is not entirely on him. Take a look at kind of the context of the whole game. And I think it's really close to, it's not quite what my early career Andrew Luck takes were, which are, he only has so many 4th quarter comebacks because he keeps on throwing interceptions and putting the team down that he has to dig the team out of. So he's actually not that great compared to, I think, the top quarterbacks that he is being compared to. That was kind of my take on Andrew Luck earlier in his career. I think his final year, kind of before he retired, weirdly, was obviously really phenomenal. And I think it's kind of related to that, where Cousins has this phenomenal 4th quarter comeback, but only because the Vikings are down. That's the only way you can have that 4th quarter comeback. And the Vikings are down in part because of Kirk. I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle where I wouldn't blame the complete lack of offensive production on Cousins, but I would say he played a pretty heavy role in it. And so I think in the end, his final grade for the game or whatever, obviously positive, but probably not as positive as I think a lot of people would put it, because it's very easy to remember that kind of comeback. And the thing is, if Jaron Kearse gets called for PI on that final play, which a lot of people wanted it to be OPI, I thought it should be DPI, and the Vikings kind of got away with it. And Kearse in particular, I think that there's a case for both, but I think that when you've got a jersey tug, that's just the more obvious one, and that's just the one that should be called and would be called. Plus, I don't care as much about OPI as DPI. Maybe that's just a personal thing. That we're talking about Cousins as a guy that can't close out games when the defense allowed a 19-play drive, right? And so, and then we'd be talking a lot more about the problems in that first half. And I think nothing changes about the way Cousins plays based off of the results of those final 3 plays on the defense, right? And so we should be kind of aware that Cousins probably caused one of those sacks, that Cousins probably, missed a lot of opportunities, and that Cousins, was he completed 11 of 12 passes in the first half for 4.83 yards per attempt, right? And so clearly he just wasn't being aggressive enough, even though that defense is doing a lot to take away from him. I'll also say this, he deserves credit for reducing the amount of pressure that a fairly bad offensive line should by rights have given up. So it's a mixed positive grade. I'd say it's more like an A- B+. That would be the kind of A+ it's similar to the Green Bay game last year, week 2, where he leads to this tremendous comeback and everyone kind of just forgets that the first half was kind of iffy.
Yeah. Would you have anything you'd like to say to Eddie right now? Eddie, the football dog on Twitter?
Eddie, I'm glad that you've subscribed to The Athletic. I know that you were forced into this by the terms of the bet. I like to think of this as the universe kind of telling you, a dog who has difficulty reading, that you should be subscribed to The Athletic, that it's really good to give me and my colleagues money. And in return, you get some of the best sports coverage in the business of almost any sport, in almost any market. And really, that's what it's really all about. It's not about the indisputable fact that we as Norse Code are better at fantasy football, and that we won this game against you.
Mm-hmm.
But it is a fact. But it's not about that fact.
No.
It wouldn't be. It's really just about kind of the tremendous sports coverage that we have the opportunity to provide. And it's not about the fact that you run your mouth a lot and just really want to embarrass us, because we're above that. And we're above making you feel bad for losing a fantasy football game, which you put a bet on and that you opted into in a stupid league. Not about that.
In a league where anything could go wrong.
Yeah, right. So I don't want to spend too much time dwelling on the fact that you made a stupid bet against an obviously superior opponent. And I just won't want to spend time thanking you for contributing to the coverage that me and my colleagues can provide at The Athletic.
There we go. And just a reminder, folks, that a win for one of us is a win for all of us.
We did win.
It applied when Dusty won the fantasy title that year, and Arif and I both celebrated, driving Dusty mad. Even years later, when I visited him and brought it up, it just gave me the look of like death. It was wonderful. But just a reminder that a win for one of us is a win for all of us. So. Good to see your win. You will need to pick out a new avatar for him for the remainder of the season. May I suggest one of the wonderful Arif photoshops that exist on the internet? I feel like that's the best way to go about it. Or just
it's my cat. It's gonna be my cat.
It's gonna be your cat. Aw. I enjoy how quickly you got that. That was fantastic. Okay. While we are at it, I'm going to set the timer. We are going to go to the mailbag, and we're only answering this question once this year. And as like an extra added level of difficulty, I'm going to give you 60 seconds to tell me why Arif hates turkey so much. On your mark, get set, go.
Are you kidding me? Have you had turkey? It's awful. It's dry. It tastes bad. It's dry. Other meats are better. Your excuses on better ways to prepare turkey, like smoking or frying or spatchcocking or whatever, are ways better spent preparing other meats. You can apply those methods to other meats. Those other meats taste better, and it's dry. And also, if turkey's so goddamn good, why are you only eating it on Thanksgiving? It's because it's not that good. It's a hassle. It's huge. It costs a lot on Thanksgiving, and it's dry. I just don't understand why people spend so much time carrying and defending turkey when Benjamin Franklin was right. It should be the national bird because we shouldn't kill it to eat it. It should be protected, endangered. I don't care how stupid it is. I don't care how stupid it looks. It is both of those things. But it really, you can cook any meat you want for Thanksgiving, have the family over, and you choose in your infinite wisdom to give them a bird that takes so much more effort to taste reasonable or good instead of the 10 other meats you could have. Nicely done.
I'm glad that we were able to condense that this year into something that's not a 15 to 20 minute bit. So we have the 1 minute version, and I might as well just clip that and just like keep it for you. Be like, anytime somebody messages you and asks like, why do you hate turkey? Like, okay, hold on, let me pull up the YouTube link.
It's a trash meat. It's dry.
Yes, I was expecting trash meat to be in there. I did enjoy your dry comment. On there.
Oh, did I say that? Yeah, it's not a particularly moist bird.
Yeah. That's just a fun sentence. Galileo asks, is Zimmer helping his corners less than in previous years, or are they just playing worse? Also, Dylan asks, why are all the cornerbacks bad now?
I think it's because they're not good. Zimmer is doing stuff differently with the cornerbacks this year, but I think that's an attempt to compensate for some of the problems that he's been seeing with them. and an overcorrection to play them up top. The problem, of course, is that the Vikings have allowed more explosive plays in the passing game this year than they have in the Zimmer era. I think maybe in 2014 they could have allowed more. But 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, they allowed fewer explosive passing plays than the Vikings have already this year. So he's trying to help them up top, trying to put them in a cover three that specifically keeps them capped on the receivers instead of, the kind of cover three man that you tend to see in Seattle. And so it, in theory, prevents those explosive passing plays, but it just doesn't. And I'd much rather that you play him in man with safeties up top or something like that. And, maybe I'm wrong. Obviously, he's a smarter defensive mind than I am. But I think that that's probably better because all of those small plays underneath really kill the Vikings, I think more than even those explosive plays that they've given up so far. So there are schematic changes. It doesn't look a lot like the stuff that we saw 2 years ago. The schematic changes are meant to address the nature of the cornerbacks. But I think, Xavier Rhodes has lost a step. I think it is important to point out that Anthony Harris and Harrison Smith have made mistakes at safety that they haven't been dinged for. And that Wayne's weaknesses are being kind of exploited again. The stuff that he was really good at was the stuff that he was able to kind of focus on, especially in 2017, but also in 2018. And we're just seeing a lot less of it. And they're kind of getting at the fact that he's a kind of a stiff player, and so he's kind of easy to exploit at times. So I think that's kind of it. Obviously, if Mike Hughes didn't have such an enormously bad game 2 weeks ago, it would be easy to just say, hey, just play Mike Hughes more often. But it's tough. And then obviously everyone wants to see more Holton Hill. I'm curious about it. I feel like there's a lot to lose, but I don't think you will end up losing a lot by just playing him a couple more snaps and seeing kind of if he can play up to his potential.
Roger wants to know if Arif finds the Vikings' first down rushing defense increasingly worrisome. It seems the Vikings defense is facing a lot of second and short situations on after first down runs.
So I was kind of curious about that because I felt like it felt true to me. I felt like I've seen them a lot in second and middle and second and short, but it actually turns out a 4.2 yards per carry on 1st and 10 outside of the red zone, which is the 9th best such yards per attempt in the league. They allow a first down rate that's really, really low. Only 8.3% of runs on 1st and 10 outside of the red zone have resulted in a first down, which is 6th best in the league. And they've faced 133 scenarios. So that seems to be kind of robust. Generally speaking, runs on 1st and 10 average a little bit over 5 yards a carry, or at least 4.5 yards a carry. And so the Vikings, their performance in that situation is actually pretty above league average. They don't actually have to deal with second and long or second and short as a result of runs all that often. Now, whether or not they actually face second and short a lot, that you kind of have to figure that out as kind of like a proportion of total second downs. And so, if you give up a first down on 1st and 10, you're just going to have fewer second and short. So it's not a great way to look at it, the total number of second and shorts. But if it helps to take a look at how many second and shorts they've had, the Vikings have only had 13 outside of the red zone. And that's 7th or 8th best in the league. So they actually don't have to deal with second and short, as long as we define it as between 1 and 3 yards and second down, all that often.
All right. Next question is going to be something somewhat similar to that. Is it just me, or the Vikings seem to be struggling to convert 3rd and 4th and short up the middle this year? Is it a lack of interior offensive line size? Are they average, and I'm only remembering the failures? What's going on?
They're actually better than average. So yes, sort of. And I say sort of because there's a little bit of a split here. So the Vikings convert 71.4% of all 3rd and shorts. And I'm actually going to define 3rd and short differently than the way I defined 2nd and short, which is 3rd and 2 or 3rd and 1, because teams treat 3rd and 3 a lot differently in terms of how often they run the ball. So They're sixth best in the league at converting third and short. But when they run the ball on third and short, so this is kind of interesting. So historically, it's just much better to run the ball, almost regardless of team, on third and short. And teams don't do it enough. They throw the ball way too often third and short, and they're much, much less likely to convert. The Vikings are a little bit different in that they've only converted 2/3 of those runs, 66.7%, but they've also only run it 12 times. So I wouldn't say that that's a very good sample for determining how good they are on third and short running the ball. I would still say they should run the ball more often, but they actually are pretty decent at converting third and short. Again, sixth best in the league. So they're not really struggling that much on third and short, and actually they're really good on fourth and short, which is the only time they ever go for it on fourth down anyway. They just kind of missed that one that Zimmer focused on, but they actually made a bunch of others this year. So that I think is part of it. To the extent that they do fail on third and short situations, running the ball, I would say it's much more likely to be an offensive line thing, but they are sneaking the quarterback a lot more, and that. That's a combination of, the quarterback finding the right gap and the offensive line getting pushed. And quarterback sneaks tend to convert anyway, so I'm not too concerned about that. But yeah, I wouldn't worry too much about conversion rates in those situations.
Next question is from Corey Rug, who asks, how does Irv Smith stack up against Fant and Hawkinson as players so far?
It's three completely different types of tight ends, so it's very difficult to compare them straight up. I would say if a general manager was starting from a blank slate and based off of the rookie year so far could pick any of the three of them, there's a really good case to make for Irv Smith being the best of the three in terms of performance. But Fant still has more long-term potential, and Hawkinson still has more long-term potential than Fant does, just because of the athletic profiles and that rookie years don't tell us a lot for tight ends unless they're really good rookie years, in which case that tells us they're usually very good, unless it's like a Tony Moeaki or John Carlson situation where injury kind of derails them. But, for the most part, Irv Smith has been playing pretty well, but they're playing Fant like, the Broncos are playing Fant a lot like a traditional tight end that just runs passing routes a lot more. So not necessarily a lot like Jimmy Graham, although there's a lot of similarities there. And, the Lions are treating Hawkinson, like a traditional tight end who's got the ability to block and so on. And he still has more to learn in blocking. I expect him to be better at blocking at this point just because of what he did in college. And, he's been pretty good at receiving and stuff, but he's a more traditional tight end. And Irv Smith is really gadgety. So you're seeing him run kind of, not unusual routes, but he's running motions and running across. He's doing a couple of seam throws and stuff like that. A lot of rolling with the play action and stuff. So you can't really evaluate that very well. But I would say he's the best performer out of those three so far. Plus, I know that I argue that Fant and Hawkinson have more potential based off of their athletic profiles, but it's difficult to ignore the fact that Irv Smith is also the youngest, and so he's got a potential for that dynamic range to increase fairly monumentally. So, it's difficult to answer the question because they're very different types of tight ends, and I expect to see more from Fant and Hawkinson in the second year. But really good returns from Irv Smith, especially in comparison. Yeah.
Tim Clark asks, thoughts on Diggs blowing up in the first half? In my opinion, if he doesn't blow up, I don't think they come back because everyone else was in a funk. Play calling was passive. Kirk was passive. He seems to be the only vocal leader on the team, and sometimes leaders have to yell to get your attention. This team comes in somewhat checked out or in a funk or just not ready to play, and sometimes they need a butt kicking, and he seems to be the only one willing to do it.
I think there's something to be said about Diggs potentially impacting the way the offense goes based off of that, but I don't think it's all that much, and I don't think he just finds Thielen and yells. Like, Thielen is kind of managing him. So, I don't know how much you're going to get out of, Diggs yelling at Thielen. It's not like Thielen's going to run to Kirk and be like, hey, man, Diggs says you should have thrown this. And he's like, next time I'll throw that then. I don't think it's like that. So, I don't know that there's a ton of that. But I'm not going to say it's a zero, there's zero impact, and I'm not going to say it's a necessarily negative impact. It could be a positive impact, but I don't even think Diggs sees himself as a leader yet. I think he wants to be a leader. I think his quotes after the game indicated that he wants to be a leader and that he's not at that place yet, which is a really interesting thing to say. I'd argue it's fairly mature and reflective, at least in terms of like post hoc reactions to your own emotions. You don't tend to see a lot of that. But if he's not seeing himself as a leader, that doesn't necessarily mean he's not. He could be impacting people in ways that he doesn't, fully grasp. But I think it is more likely than not that he's not really attempting to or getting across to everybody. So I'd say he's probably not playing a huge role in the way the offense kind of exploded in the second half, from the perspective of his frustrations kind of being worn on his sleeve. But I'm also not going to say that there was zero impact, because I'm very confident that his very vocal feedback, if you will, about what's working and what's not and when he should be thrown to was taken into account when they kind of started drying up the second half adjustments. And I think if he doesn't relentlessly advocate for himself in those situations, he's probably seeing fewer balls. And if he's seeing fewer balls, that's not good for the offense.
Jim asks, is the reason Kirk doesn't gamble house money on free plays is that he's just a really, really good game manager at quarterback? Adjusting on the fly like that seems to go against his hardwiring.
Yes and no. I just think he just doesn't see it. And I think that that's been the case several times. To me, that's not an adjustment on the fly in the way that Kirk tends to struggle with, because you can incorporate that into part of your rule set. Basically, which Rodgers does, right? Rodgers is a phenomenal improviser, but I don't think his reaction to a free play is evidence of that, because it's part of something that's been planned beforehand. So I think it's just a rule set that he needs to incorporate. And I don't think that that's really a case of improvisation. I just think he doesn't process that there's a free play, which I said earlier in the show, it's very difficult to do that. But if you're a really good quarterback, that's one of your expectations. So yeah, I don't know.
Ian Pauly is asking your thoughts on turkey flavored Pringles. I'm willing to bet.
This is harassment?
I assume that he just wants to find something drier than turkey for you.
Yeah, this is harassment. Obviously, I'm okay with Pringles being dry. This does not impact the Pringles in terms of their dryness, so fine. But the taste is not worth it. It's not a particularly great taste. And while it does get rid of a lot of the downsides of turkey, some of which I didn't even mention, which includes the crazy amount of tendons that occur in the dark meat that you have to eat around. What the hell is that? Just eat chicken. It's just not that great a taste. The roast chicken flavored Pringles that I assume exist and are also probably terrible still probably taste better.
If you're going to get a meat flavored Pringle, you should find a different meat flavor, is what you're trying to say, which is basically what you're trying to say about your turkey take.
Yeah. Because the turkey has structural problems, but it also has taste problems. I don't care if you're deep frying the turkey. Deep fry a better meat.
You know what? If I find turkey flavored Pringles out here, I will eat them and post my immediate reaction to them, and then attempt to feed them to you while you're not looking in Seattle.
Feed them. Yeah, okay.
Like, we'll be sitting next to each other at the taping, and your mouth will just open slightly, and I'll just slide a hand. Just, oh my god, what the? What? Is this gravy? What is this? Why has my life gone horribly wrong? It'll be fantastic. I look forward to this. Let's go to the next question, which is from Kyle Slaby, who asks, does Denver fail the Cousins litmus test, or do you chalk this one up to random variance?
I don't know if I would chalk that up to variance, but it's very clear that as a result of the litmus test, Denver's not suddenly an average or bad defense. They're still a very good defense. So it's not as if this is the product of that. Variance is tough because it basically just says, Kirk randomly will have a good game and randomly have a bad game, and you can't go away from his true self, which is to be bad against good defenses and good against bad defenses. But we should be open to the possibility that he is actually good against good against good defenses. Because we've seen a couple of samples this year where he has performed in those situations. So obviously early on, we saw poor performances against Green Bay and Chicago. But we saw a pretty good performance against Detroit. And again, I thought that was a pretty good defense going into the game. And then I think that we should just be open to this idea that he can be good against good defenses because, as he grows as a quarterback, our takes should be evolving on him and stuff. So that's something that I think would be kind of worth thinking about, and it's less about the Kirk Cousins litmus test. So, the possibility exists that it's just random variance, or the possibility exists that the Denver Broncos are secretly an average defense. But I think it's more likely that Cousins does have an opportunity to kind of overcome this particular bug.
Yeah. Next question is from Raul, who asks, how can the Vikings mitigate the lack of ball skills at corner? Play more zone?
So that is a fairly, I don't want to say normal or typical response, but that's a fairly decent way to generate turnovers if your typical defense isn't working, because zone keeps your eyes on the quarterback, allows you to break on the ball, and that allows you to just generate more turnovers. That's been kind of the thinking. There's a little bit of back and forth on that. Is the higher you go up in terms of the level of football that you play, the less that's true. Like, for example, zone running decreases the number of tackles for loss, but the further up you go in football, the less that's true, to the point where in the NFL, zone running versus man running doesn't really correlate all that much with avoiding tackles for loss. And I think the same is kind of true for turnover generation in different types of coverages. So I wouldn't say that would be my response. And then also the Vikings just aren't a team that generates a ton of turnovers. There was that brief moment in 2016 where they generated a ton. But for the most part, defensively, they kind of rely more on forcing punts, and that's fine if you can consistently do it. The ball skills thing, I don't know. So Rhodes has been losing a couple of contested catches in pretty spectacular fashion. So I think he lost one to, was it Geronimo Allison week 2? He lost 2 to Marvin Jones, including one very impressive one at the end. He just lost this one to Cortland Sutton. And at some point, I should get over this idea that, oh my God, that receiver just made a great play. It happened to be on Xavier Rhodes. And at some point start interrogating this question about whether or not Xavier Rhodes has the ability to kind of win in contested situations. Especially because, hey, there's that PI that he caused in a situation that shouldn't have even been contested. I'm referring to a specific play in my head, but I forgot who it was against, and I'm confident that there's more than one play that conjures up when I say that. So, who knows? But at some point, I should just kind of say, hey, if he's not winning these contested situations, maybe he's just bad at it. So that's kind of a curious question to look over. But the Vikings don't tend to draft corners that have a ton of ball skills. So I don't think it's really about, like, Mackenzie Alexander didn't have any in college. Trey Waynes didn't have a ton in college. I don't know if Mike Hughes had a bunch, but I would say it wasn't like Jair Alexander or Josh Jackson in terms of the number of interceptions he produced. That's what I want to say, but I don't remember. But they just don't tend to bring in corners that have a ton of interceptions coming into the NFL. So it's partially just kind of who they draft for. And I get it. And so schematically, you kind of work yourself around that. I don't think that they should kind of switch to zone coverages, because I think that that's kind of closer to the stuff that's not working for them. And again, I'll kind of reiterate my take from earlier in the episode that I actually would like to see more man coverages with safety help over the top, which does lead to a lot more cover 2. People don't tend to like cover 2 because of like bad memories of the Frazier era. But we're in a cover 3 league, and I'd like to see a lot less of it, and teams are attacking cover 3 really well. And so maybe the response is the cover 4 stuff they're doing, but that turns into man a lot anyways, but without the safety help. And so maybe it's time to kind of reevaluate what cover 2 can do for you.
Yeah. Next question is from John Mainland, who says, Andrew Sendejo has an interception for and against the Vikings. How rare is this? Also, having gate crashed with a small soft toy for the London live recording, I highly recommend going to the Seattle meetup. Tell Arif he's safe from seeing me again.
That's good to know. Thanks, John. Yeah, I am curious about that. How many times somebody's got an interception against a team and for a team in a season? Don't know that there's a way to look that up. I would argue that that is tremendously rare.
It'd be like, that's kind of like in poker when you have a really bad like low card and you're already in the hand, so whatever, and you end up flopping a 4 of a kind, and you're just sitting there like, oh, well, I'll be damned. This worked out
I am
nicely.
very talented.
This is clearly skill and not luck at all. Fantastic. Brad asks, James, given the tight salary cap conditions next year, would the Vikings be better off to draft another corner in the first or second round, and then another in the 5th or 6th, let Trey Waynes walk, and trade Rhodes and keep Hughes, Hill, and Mack, or take a QB high with the goal of letting Kirk go after the next year, depending on his development?
What do you think, James?
There's a lot of moving parts here, and I'm just not sure that we are able to answer this question right now before the end of the season, because college players get hurt quite a bit too. So I really feel like this is a question that would be best answered after the college football playoffs are done and all the bowl games, and we can really take a look at what's available for corners.
What a phenomenal cop-out. Love it.
Hey, we saw Tua go down, and that was a gruesome injury. So, like, anything's possible at that point. Arif.
I've heard a couple of this means Tua for the Vikings takes, by the way.
Oh, why not? Arif, given your expertise in animal behavior and felines, my cat is spraying all over the house. She was a feral cat when I adopted her at 9 months, and I never really left her. We mostly just have her contained in a single room and cleaned up after her regularly. We are about to do renovations, though, which greatly complicates this containment strategy. Is this happening to me because Vikings fans can't have nice things, and what is your recommendation?
The answer to the first version of that question is yes, it is because Vikings fans can't have nice things. The second thing is, so I actually sent this question to my girlfriend, who is a pet behavior specialist. And she was like, yeah, wow. And I was like, did you have any more than that? And she was like, I'm busy right now. I'm like, what? Okay, fine. You have work to do where you get paid to do this. And I am just sending you random questions from people emailing in based off of my knowledge of feral cats, which is not as tremendous as hers. I would say it's probably because it's very, very difficult to socialize feral animals. When they're young, obviously it's a lot easier because you can socialize them with other cats and stuff like that. The renovation thing, that's just kind of your own situation in terms of the specifics and what the cat can get in and out of and how to contain the cat from that perspective. But long term, there needs to be some way to socialize the cat. And based on how young they are, you might be able to introduce another cat that can kind of teach it how to use a litter box and stuff like that. But dealing with feral animals, even if they're not aggressive or anything like that, they might just be kind of a nice animal that just doesn't have the animal behavior rules. That's just so difficult and complicated, which I think is why my girlfriend was like, wow, lol.
No. This was much more of a situation of don't bother me at work.
Well, it's just feral animals very, very difficult to deal with. So that's something that probably requires a lot of extensive research online that doesn't involve asking a podcast about football a question about cats.
Likely not. And a question to me, my youngest daughter, she is 4, has developed quite an advanced palate. She likes eating Brussels sprouts, carrots with dip, beef dip sandwiches with strong tasting cheese, mushrooms, and lots of onions. Although in here it says unions, I assume that means onions. She will ask for steamed broccoli for a snack and thinks ham is better than turkey at Thanksgiving. Well,
phenomenal.
Yeah. But she recently has started asking questions about unique eating opportunities. She asked if people taste more like chicken, ham, or beef, and I thought you would be the best person to answer this, given your son is a cannibal and your wife has access to the best cuts.
Both these things are true. Cannot 100% facts. So
I don't.
Based off your expertise.
Based on my. What I should have done is sent this question over to my wife and have her answer it the same way that Chelsea asked yours. And me, wow, lol. And then just don't bother me at work. From what I have heard, chicken, but I'm same thing that I would do with human meat. I'm not touching that. Damian Barrett asks, is it just me or have Curse's performance improved since his indiscretion? Any chance the judge is a Vikings fan and can sit on the paperwork until after the season?
I don't think the Dewey led to playing better. I think he's been playing really well all season. He just lost some opportunities in the middle of the season, probably for matchup reasons, maybe for locker room reasons. I don't know. Got some opportunities again and played really well. So I would argue he's actually been playing really well all season. I don't think the Dewey did it.
Also, what is your verdict on the Mandalorian TV show on Disney Plus? Which is also to say we may accidentally discuss a spoiler or two. So if you have not watched The Mandalorian, or if you intend to watch The Mandalorian, now would be a good time to end the show and come back next week when we have a random bi-week show before we do the live show in Seattle. So, Arif, The Mandalorian for you.
I would die for the yodelet. That little thing is amazing. As a show, it's weird because I think for most shows, you can tell whether or not it's good actually in the first episode. I know a lot of people want to wait until like the third episode or something, but usually you can tell within the first episode if the show has a really good understanding of the way to shoot a show, its writing, the way it handles arcs and stuff like that. A show that is bad in the first episode is very likely to be bad. Because they've got forever to try and write that first episode and get you hooked. It's their first shot, and if they don't do it, they don't do it. If it's good in the first episode, obviously it can be bad later because they've expended all their energy trying to get that first episode good. So that doesn't do anything. But I think The Mandalorian doesn't give you a ton of clues in the first two episodes as to whether or not it's a really good show or whether or not it's just a really great consumable show, I enjoy it a lot. I think its special effects are really tremendous for a serial. So I think that's really great. The makeup and the CG or whatever you want to call it, or however they combine it to create those visual effects are really phenomenal. The writing it doesn't tell me anything one way or the other in terms of how good it's going to be. My guess is that it's going to be a better version of, I was just watching Jack Ryan, the other day because it's easy to work to, and it's just not a very good show, but that's kind of what you expect from a lot of these like Quantico type action series where the writing is whatever and the action is whatever. And I just feel like it's going to be a better version of that where you're not going to get really incredible character writing. But you're going to get pretty good action. It's going to be a visual feast and that's fine. That's my sense, but I just honestly, I don't know because I feel like we just haven't had a bunch of clues in the first two episodes to say that the writing is great. But everything else, it has been really fun.
Yeah.
So I enjoy it a lot.
The way I've been describing it is that it has that like lived in feeling. It's not like the prequels where everything looks shiny new and recently purchased at Best Buy. Like this has a real lived in feeling to it. And it's not nostalgia for nostalgia's sake or anything. It feels like it's got its own little story. I'm enjoying it. It really does feel like a Western at the moment, and maybe that just has to do with like the location of the first two episodes. But
no, I think you're right. I don't think it's just location. I think it follows. Like I was actually going to compare it to Firefly with just less dialogue because of that. Like it's like a Western. And it's got, kind of these snappy action sequences that are shot really well. And it's a lot of fun. Like, and the old universe stuff, the lived in universe, which is, I think when Star Wars did that in episode 4 and then obviously then 5 and 6, where they've got this kind of used universe feel where everything is old and not busted, but like clearly lived in. It's one of the most influential sci-fi things that had happened, in Firefly drew a direct inspiration from it. Battlestar Galactica did in terms of their aesthetic. And I think you're right. It continues that aesthetic extraordinarily well.
Yeah. And I can live being in a situation where, you never see his face. You're just, constantly going through. Somebody had compared it to like you're watching a video game cutscene with him just walking around with the helmet on. I'm totally fine with that. And the interactions so far have been really great. Is this where I reveal that I didn't like Firefly?
That's a lot to drop at the end of an episode, James.
I didn't like it. I tried. I watched the movie. I was with someone for a number of years that was obsessed with the show. I couldn't do it.
What if that's the reason? It's because you've got all these hangups attached to your attachments.
I didn't like it at the time too. Like it was.
Did you watch the movie first?
No,
because I don't think the movie is as good as a lot of people think it is.
Nope, I watched the show first and then the movie. I watched the episodes multiple times, attempting to like get it, because if it's something that they're it's something she's really into. Okay, I'm willing to give it a shot and really let me really try here. No, I didn't like it. Didn't like it at all.
Maybe you're not like a Whedon fan? How'd you feel about Buffy?
I liked Buffy. There were a couple of I didn't watch a ton of Buffy, but the episodes I did watch I enjoyed. So no, I just
well, you're wrong.
I'm fine, but comparing it to something I really didn't like, maybe go, oh, I
just mean like in terms of you don't see space westerns, right? Like I think from a feeling perspective, they feel a lot different. And I was actually trying to distance Firefly from it because that would hype it up way too much. Mm-hmm. But for you, I guess it does the opposite. It's like, oh, please, more distance.
Like, it tastes more like Miller Lite. Oh, that's
wow, Miller Lite.
That's
Holy
too bad,
crap, man.
Oh. I don't
no,
want that at all.
I agree that it's like a Western and in space, and that's kind of what Firefly aimed to be, and that I think was a really fun concept. But it doesn't feel anything like Firefly. It was just kind of more the genre it fit in, and I thought when you said that was really appropriate. Yeah, no, you're definitely wrong about Firefly, and it really sucks because now I can't trust your opinions about TV because you had that bad TV opinion. Now I can't trust your opinions about food. Because your son's a cannibal, and you pour water on your cereal. So
do that one time. Swear to God. All right, we're ending this. There will not be another episode this week as we are on the bye and we have nothing to preview at the end of the week. We will likely do a mini episode next week, early in the week to knock out some Thanksgiving stuff and to kind of give a little bit of an overview of how the NFC is doing, playoff race and all that, just kind of catching up. Hopefully we'll be in a situation where we can discuss some like dumb thing happening in the middle of an episode, because we got a lot of messages about how much people liked the Myles Garrett reaction.
I don't know why, actually, because I can't imagine our reaction was all that different from everybody else's.
No, I think it was just the you had an oh my God. I tell people that it's rare that I have an opportunity to break news to you, especially over Twitter. So this was my opportunity to do that, and I thoroughly enjoyed that, and yeah, so hope you guys enjoyed we brought up the Myles Garrett thing twice in the mailbag last episode. So if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, we have a live reaction to, oh my, he's got that helmet, doesn't he? Oh, yep.
Yeah, word. Oh,
right to the skull. Too bad.
Unsportsmanly.
Indeed, sir. Indeed. Arif, let's plug some stuff.
Yeah, I've mentioned The Athletic maybe a couple more times than I usually do in a podcast like this, so sorry about that. But I've got pieces there. I broke down the three, biggest plays of they're probably the biggest plays of the Vikings comeback. I talked a lot about, the nature of that 2-minute offense and the Vikings going into a 2-minute coming out of the half. And then I've got some more pieces coming up. Got a mailbag for The Athletic, and I'll probably be talking about like Vikings Pro Bowlers and stuff.
Yeah, seems like a decent idea. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Again, we will be back next week, twice, including the live show at Podolsky's in Seattle. So, for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening, and please remember that revenge is a dish best served funky as hell. And we will see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at norsecodepodcast. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/norsecode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/norsecode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.
Do you think Mando is a slur in the Star Wars universe?
I think... No, probably not. I could see how shortening it could, but I'm willing to bet that it would have to be something slightly more derogatory for a race of beings that are that, violent and proud.
Well, maybe. Well, in terms of the shortening thing, I mean, the same thing happened to the Japanese, right?
Yeah.
Where that slur is just the first syllable. So, I don't know, people just say it with a lot of invective, but also people just hate Mandalorians. So, like, it could just be like, Mandalorians.
Yeah.
But I don't want to say the whole word, so I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. The parallels between a Western where the character is hanging off the train and the Mandalorian hanging off of the moving fortress was like almost a slap not like a slap in the face, but almost like, hey, look, we're doing this. Like,
we're a Western.
We're a Western. Can you tell? All right.